G'day and thanks for joining us for another Australia Talks. I'm DK and I'm joined as always by my lovely co-host Ardeet. Today is Thursday, the 28th of May 2026, and our topics this week are Australians increasingly staying put when it comes to jobs and housing, and possible new parties rising to match One Nation. Of course, we've got our Two Ticks Town Talk, and then we'll jump into This Week in Australian History, and we'll finish off, as always, with a 4X bottle top trivia. But before we get into all of that, we'll catch up on the last week after Croc Watch.
Let there be 1,000 blossoms bloom, as far as I'm concerned. But I ain't spending any time on it, because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person is torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
Oh, as I stated last month, we often talk about crocs and farming, so I'd want to give you an overview of the whole industry in Australia. This is part 2. I'll leave a link to part 1 in the show notes in case you missed last month, but a brief recap is that the eggs are collected in the wet season according to strict quotas. They're then incubated and hatched, usually at the farm, sometimes by the local mobs up there. And then after that, they're reared in captivity for about 3 years, or until they get to about 1.8 metres in length, so 6 foot in the old money. What then happens after they're at the correct size is they're slaughtered. As you probably guess, I think that's a spoiler alert. So yeah, they're humanely slaughtered on the farm. There's codes of practices there is often with these things, but the standard method, they get restrained. There's electrical stunning to render them unconscious, and then that's followed by mechanical stunning with a penetrative captive bolt gun aimed at the brain. So similar to a lot of abattoirs. The spinal cord's then severed at the nape of the neck, and there's the brain tissue is then destroyed with a rod that goes through the whole the back. So it's all a number of steps, and ensures that the animal basically doesn't feel anything and is well and truly dead. And also too, there's the practical side that you're probably thinking, I don't know that they do that much when they're slaughtering cattle. Part of it too is they want to, with a lot of destroying the brain tissue and that, they want to prevent a whole lot of reflexive movements that could damage the skin, because that's the money. Really, that's the big thing for it. So their goal is rapid unconsciousness and death with minimal suffering and no damage to the valuable hide. So look, there's some animal welfare groups have raised concerns, but look, I suppose there always is, but there's also a practicality to life and the reality of these types of processes. So sorry if that sounds a bit heartless to people who find that. I can understand why you might find that a little bit sort of distressing or heavy, but I mean that's how we get our meat. That's how we get these products. So in my opinion, if it's done humanely, that's what we're aiming for. After that, there is the skinning and the initial processing. So they do what's called a precise belly cut method, because the belly skin's the most valuable part. It's smooth, it's uniform, it's pliable, and it's free of the bony osteoderms. Those bits that stick up that you see on crocodiles. That it's distinctive.
Yeah, that surprises me, because I feel like that is the distinction of crocodile skin. You kind of want that, but I guess depending on the application, you very possibly don't. If you ask me, I would have thought the back, like the hide of the back, would be, because it is the most distinctive part of crocodile skin, but obviously not. They like the belly. I wouldn't have picked that.
You and me both would have failed in that question too. By had similar thoughts. But no, that's apparently the sought after part, and accounts for the majority of the animal's actual commercial worth. And then the rest of the skin, the flanks, the back, the neck, the tail, and limbs, that all gets used too. In fact, this industry, there's virtually nothing that they waste. So the lower grade sections have got irregularities or scars. They're graded for secondary uses like belts, wallets, watch straps, footwear trimmings, or upholsteries, or novelty items. And the back or hornback skin retains its textured armoured appearance with those scales, and it's used where a rugged look is desired. So if you do want to have that really strong look, you would use the back. I suppose you and I could look down at the Louis Vuitton bags that we purchased and see what. Yeah, actually, I should. It's funny. I didn't even do that. I'll have to do that after this podcast. I'll do it tomorrow, because I've seen crocodile skin things before. But I don't know about the really high-end ones. So, yeah. Anyway, the carcass is then processed, so they get the tail's got really good meat in there. They do other meat cuts for human consumption. Low-grade meat goes to pet food. And byproducts like bones and blood get turned into collagen for pet food or pharmaceutical. And the skulls, the teeth, or sometimes even whole taxidermied animals become souvenirs. So they're really aiming for zero waste in here. And finally, there's the distribution and global markets. So the raw salted skins are the primary product. That makes up about 90% of the farming revenue. So in case you don't know, when you're preserving skins or getting them ready to go into the tanning process, you just coat them in salt. They're just packed in salt, and that dries them out and puts them in a state that's ready for tanning. So there's not much tanning actually done in Australia. In fact, most of the skins are exported raw to their specialist tanneries in France, Japan, Italy, and Singapore. And then it goes to other countries for like processing and dyeing and finishing. So Australia supplies around about 60% of the global saltwater croc skin trade, and we export about 35 to 40,000 skins annually. So the main customer is France, taking about 90% of Northern Territory's exports, and that's mainly for luxury fashion houses such as Hermes and brands like Louis Vuitton. Singapore takes a few for re-export, and some goes to the US, Germany, UK, Italy, Japan, Malaysia, and Thailand. The meat mainly goes to Southeast Asia and China, with some domestic sales. Oil and fat extracted from visceral fats and tail muscles get used in traditional medicines, and the blood gets used for some of the pharmaceutical products. Teeth as curios, bones and skulls for tourists, and some traditional medicine. So in 2024, Northern Territory, croc farming alone generated 46 million in direct revenue and contributed 80 million to the broader economy. And the entire industry up there supports a whole lot of jobs. And it also demonstrates how the regulated farming can also align with the commercial use and conservation. So it's actually a really it's tightly regulated from wild egg to luxury product, but from being an industry where it was basically, no rules, everything goes, and the crocs were on the verge of dying out. It's now transformed a once endangered species into this sustainable economic resource, emphasising full utilisation of every bit of the animal, and the croc numbers have been coming back up, as we've mentioned in previous croc Croc watches. So it's actually worked out well, and coming from me, I've got to say, I think the government and bureaucrats in charge of this industry, which has been very much in consultation with the people involved, seem to have done a very good job. Seems to have been a win-win for everyone. So there you go. That's a second part and final part of the overview of the crocodile farming industry in Northern Territory and Queensland, and one over in WA. So, yeah, there you go.
Interesting. Very good.
Yeah.
And how has your week been this last week?
It's been reasonably... It's been a pretty busy week with sort of feeling better. I've been catching up with stuff, been doing mowing, spraying of weeds, catching up with some stuff in the garden. There was a little bit of woodworky type stuff that I wanted to do. And I went and had, on Tuesday, had a very tasty anniversary dinner with Mrs. Ardeet. So that was our, wedding-wise, 36th anniversary. But
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we've been together 40 years, actually. So, it's been a while. As she said, 2/3 of our life, more than with anyone else.
That's cool.
Yeah. Went to a local French restaurant, which we've been before. And every time, I love the snails. They have, they've got a fairly fixed menu of a lot of things, and then rotate a few specials. And they had some specials there. One was it was like a fish tartare. I think it might have been rockling or something like that. And I was almost tempted, but no, went back to the snails, which Mrs. Ardeet laughed because I just can't resist them, even when I'm tempted by something else. And then it's fearsome garlic breath the next day because oh my god, they're slathered in garlic, but hard to go by. And then had some slow cooked lamb shoulder with some white beans, which was really tasty. I don't know exactly how they did it, but I'm guessing, well, I know how you do the slow cooked, obviously, but presentation wise, I'm guessing they must have pressed the meat into a ring for the final bit of, I don't know whether they gave it a quick bake or a steam or something like that for the final presentation, so that not only was it really sort of slow cooked meat, because it was sort of pieces within this ring, it all just sort of like dropped apart. It was just, really succulent. So yeah, that was that was a good feed. And had a creme brulee, a good flat white to finish off. So, yeah.
Sounds like a good feed for sure.
Yeah, bloody oath. And how about you, Sniffles? How was your week?
Yeah, I'm a bit sick this week. I've sort of been battling something over the last couple of days, and I thought it was just sort of like allergies and things like that. But no, I think I have to concede that I am actually sick. I've just been very flat. I've got a bit of a head cold, basically, which isn't surprising. I've been under a lot of under the pump lately, so I'm not. If I'm honest with myself, it shouldn't be too surprising that I'm a bit run down. And it's this time of year, of course, for us. It's winter, so we're coming into winter. So winter in a few days, actually. So yeah, look, I've got a bit of a cold. Apologise for that, for the quality of the audio for the rest of this session. But hopefully next week I'll be back fighting fit and no more sniffles. So I apologise, but there's nothing I can really do about it.
Well, you're here. It's better than not doing it, isn't it?
That's right. And
I think mates of the podcast can forgive you.
I hope so, but I'll tell you, it bothers me a hell of a lot more than it bothers you. So, if you, it's very annoying. All right, let's get stuck into it. Australians have increasingly been staying put when it comes to jobs and housing. Not switching jobs, not starting businesses, not moving states. What are we doing? Nothing, apparently. People are less mobile, less dynamic, and more risk adverse than they used to be, a series of economic indicators has shown. In 1989, almost 1 in 5 people in the workforce changed their jobs in a single year. By 2005, job mobility rate had fallen to 11%, essentially 1 in 10. The most recent data for February this year shows that 1.1 million people changed jobs, meaning job switching fell to just 7.7%, or 1 in 13. The cost of housing and the risk involved in taking an average mortgage, which I would remind you is about $700,000, yikes, with a 30-year term, are just probably some of the factors holding us back. Rachel Lee, a research economist at the XXXX Institute, said, quote, "All of these factors point towards Australians being stuck or being held in jobs that they currently have. It can be something that is stopping people from considering or even changing jobs or changing locations," end quote. Ms. Lee said that the security and benefits of traditional employment have become more attractive over time. She says, quote, "With the expansion of things like superannuation and paid parental leave, the benefits of being a wage employee have increased," end quote. So we aren't changing jobs. We are kind of trapped in our mortgages, and people, as a result, are much less risk adverse, so they're not starting small businesses. And it has changed the employment market. Self-employment has fallen sharply to a 20-year low, according to research from the XXXX Institute. This is a fundamental shift on how Australians work. The share of employee Australians who are self-employed fell from a peak in 2002 of 20% to just 14% of employment today. Sole traders dropped from 12% in 2002 to under 9% now. And it is not a lack of people wanting to start new businesses that employ staff, Ms. Lee said, but workers increasingly are choosing wage-paying jobs for greater income security. She said, quote, "Fewer people are running small businesses as wage jobs become more attractive and predictable, while the costs and complexities of setting up a business that hires and manages employees have risen. Skills like decision-making, problem-solving, and creativity, these skills which used to be a big part of being a business owner, they are now increasingly rewarded in a wage environment, while benefits like superannuation and paid leave have also made wage jobs more attractive and financially secure," end quote. And I think she's very right in that assessment.
Yeah.
Economist Dimitri Bershin, who works at Eminence Advisory, said that we were weighing down younger generations. The biggest asset most young people have is their time, skills, and the ability to sell them. And he said that high income tax rates and regulations that impeded young people from starting businesses hinder their ability to get ahead. And I cannot agree more. Another sign of decreased mobility is we are not moving interstate much as we used to, at least. In 1989, 2.2% of Aussies moved into state. That today is 1.3%. So we aren't moving around because it's too expensive, too difficult, and there isn't a benefit really to do so anymore. I think that, like, the rise of remote offices, white-collar workers can kind of move anywhere. So I feel like you would expect them to be moving to wherever they'd like to live and getting out into sort of more desirable locations and fleeing the cities to a point. But that's not really what we're seeing, which I think is really interesting. Or maybe it kind of is. Maybe they are living where they want to live, and that's just where they already are. So what do you think about this? Is this surprising to you, or is this kind of just a sign of the times?
Probably a little bit of both. The figures were surprising to me. I'm not surprised that people in really the uncertain environment we've got are choosing to do what we tend to do as humans. You know, it's the fight, flight, or freeze. And I'm not surprising that there's that choice to just stay settle with something predictable. You know, as a generalisation, humans don't like uncertainty, and unfortunately, with the cost of living, with what we're seeing for housing, which again a common theme. I mean, I think you could throw a dartboard at throw a dart at a board full of news stories, and nearly most of the time you're going to hit one that's got some relationship to housing. It's just a critical part of the Australian economy, you know, plus or minus, however you want to look at it. It's a strong subject and a strong feature. It's a bothering trend to me. You know, because the figures you presented there, and that I'd heard are sort of longer term. You know, I suppose it depends how you define longer term, but when you're talking 10, 15, 20 years and seeing some of those trends, I think that's a bothersome trend to me. It shows what would you say? There's just that desire for that sense of stability. And to me, I look at that and think, well, that's a reaction to what's going on and what's being presented as opportunity or lack of opportunity in society. And if that's the reaction to it, it's a very deep psychological reaction to the state of the community and the state of society. And whilst I look at it and I think, yeah, there's a lot of things wrong, once you start getting into that impact on people's personality, impact on life decisions, it takes it up to another level that I think is a bit of a darker, more dangerous level, because it puts people, unfortunately, it allows people to go a little bit too much into their own heads. It's good to be contemplative and introspective, but when that turns out to be the only refuge, unfortunately, our imagination and psychology, particularly if it's driven by something a bit more depressing, a bit darker, can manifest poorly, and that bothers me a lot. It also bothers me that there's that restriction on younger people, and without them feeling that there's a certain lightness, a certain levity to life. As you said, we're not seeing the startups. We're not seeing we're seeing a decrease in startups. We're seeing a decrease in entrepreneurship. That's not good for innovation. It's not good for creating new businesses. It's not good for the future economy of Australia, and it's not good for creating a lot of jobs, because small businesses create a hell of a lot of jobs, particularly in an economy like Australia. So it's something that when I first saw the headline, I thought, oh yeah, read a bit more, I thought, oh, that's actually not so good. And then listening to you giving the details of it just underscores to me what a bothersome trend this is. So yeah, bit black-pilled on this one. I mean, look, there's you know, within these situations, there's always the when the times are darkest, you also get people breaking through in different ways or doing unexpected things. So I'm optimistic by nature, so I think this can often bring out the best in some people. I don't know where we are in that stage. I fear a little bit that we're going to be going down a lot further before we start to go up. So ultimately, longer term, got a lot of faith in humanity, particularly in a place like Australia, which has got so much going for it. But in terms of the trend and what's being reported now, yeah, it's not a good thing in my opinion. What about you? How are you looking at this? What do you think about the trends, and what do you think about the impact, particularly on younger people?
This isn't surprising. It's just kind of validating in my mind of the trends I think we've all kind of seen over the last few years. So I think we've got a group of people who, if we're sort of looking at the age groups of people that would be starting businesses, sort of the late 20s, early 30s is often where that sort of starts to happen. That is a cohort of people that have been through the global financial crisis in 2008. And so naturally, those people would be more risk adverse in that space, I think, because they literally witnessed the meltdown of the global economy and the impacts that had on small business owners, particularly, who were hit particularly hard. And then, of course, 6 years ago, we had effectively the same thing happened again with COVID. And so is it surprising to me that we've got such a large cohort of young people who are quite risk adverse in the employment space? No, not at all. I actually would be surprised if it wasn't in this shape. I also think you've got compounding factors like the benefits you get from being in a good employment environment are pretty similar to what the vast majority of people would be looking for in a self-employed sort of space. There is some pretty big exceptions there, and I still think being self-employed is the best way to get ahead here in Australia, but it's not for everyone. Not everyone can be self-employed. They don't have the discipline or the skills and so on and so forth. So I don't think that's necessarily a big negative. What I think is a big negative is the fact that so many young people now who are buying homes for a first time are kind of crippled by the debt that they have. And so we've got a lot of people investing their income, the vast majority of their income, back into housing. Which we've spoken about housing so many times, and it's sort of the crux of so many problems we have here in Australia. We've got, and I do feel like this is a situation where, unfortunately, because of market factors and so on and so forth, the older generations have kind of I use the word stolen loosely, but sort of clawed back a lot of the wealth that the youth should be having now, because the property prices are so high. And the people that have benefited from that are largely the older generations now. And as a result, the younger people are kind of left sort of stuck. I think a lot of them are just like, well, if we can make it work with what we've got, we're just going to be happy with this, and we're just going to continue. So we've got a combination of massive debts, and that's just property debt. Of course, a lot of young people also have like education, like HECS debt and things like that as well. Yeah. So if we factor in the cost of living, just generally speaking, things are more expensive now. So that puts financial pressure on you. You've also got the cost of housing is so high that if you get somewhere, you kind of just grab onto it with both hands and don't let go. You've got a situation where a lot of young people have seen how badly being self-employed can go and completely destroy people. And so there's a risk adverse and sort of outside of their own control as well. Factors. And that's happened twice in their, once in a lifetime activities that have happened twice in their lifetime. So you put it all together and it's really not surprising. I think what surprised me the most was how few people are moving interstate. People very much seem to be staying where they live. They're happy with where they are and they just kind of stay there. And that kind of surprises me because I do feel like we have been a lot more mobile in the past, which we know we have. And now it seems like we're just kind of sticking with where we are, which, yeah, I think that's quite interesting. I would love to see a breakdown of these figures a bit more. And I did try to start to look to see if we could sort of get into the weeds a bit more about where people were moving and so on and so forth. But I couldn't really find really detailed information there, which was a bit frustrating, but I'm sure it's out there somewhere in the Bureau of Statistics website. Yeah. Buried somewhere deep in there. And look, we're getting a new census this year, so I think some of these figures may start falling into a bit more of some of those puzzle pieces will fall into place a bit more.
Oh, census this year, well. Is it?
I'm pretty sure it's this year. Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay.
Let me double check. Now that I said that,
because I think it's normal. It's normally an every 4-year thing, isn't it?
No,
I think
it is this year. Yeah.
Yeah, well done. Oh, of course, you got the date right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it's every 5 years, and
5. Okay.
Yeah, and we do it this year, which is good. So some of that will help put some of these puzzle pieces into place, I think. But look, broadly speaking, I'm not too surprised. It is disappointing though. Like you said, it is disappointing to the fact that we're joining bigger companies. We're not innovating as much. We're scared. Is what it basically boils down to. We don't live in a time period where we are happy to take risks and spread our wings and fly like we have in the past. Right now, it's everyone's very much head down, bum up. Just keep going with what you've got and be happy with it. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad mentality to have, but it would be much better if things were better, broadly speaking. And I think this kind of plays into as well, just like the whole, you sort of alluded to it, that doomer mentality that is very common today, where we're more isolated even though we're more connected. And I think a lot of that sort of the cultural zeitgeist of social media and all of that, of course, that all kind of plays into this as well. And I think for some people, it would push you to be more creative and innovative and things like that, and kind of be that entrepreneurial spirit. But for a lot of people, they just, I think, are kind of like, I just too hard. I'll just stick with what I have. I'm happy enough with that. So, but I think there is some positivity in that. If you I think our society, our culture would benefit greatly from being happy with what we have rather than continuously striving for more. So I think there's a balance, of course, but I do think there's a little silver lining in there that as long as people are happy, we don't necessarily need to do more. We can just be happy with what we have, I think is also a little silver lining. But I would love to see some more innovation and more entrepreneurship in Australia, but doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it's not the most upbeat, but yeah, that's honest. That's the observation.
That's it. This is reality. Sunshine and rainbows, but
yeah.
Look, I do think there's opportunity in things like this as well. If fewer people are being entrepreneurs, then there's more room for the people that are willing to take that risk to thrive in the market and so on and so forth. So in every cloudy afternoon, there is opportunity to take advantage of that and maybe get ahead or something like that. So I don't know, if you're listening to this and you're getting a bit down, I think you try and change the perspective a little bit. Think about it in a different way. Think about what you can do and why you're risk adverse, and maybe you shouldn't be, or maybe you should be. There's nothing wrong with being risk adverse in a bad risk environment. And I think there's so many compounding factors into this. It doesn't look like there's one thing you can point to. It's kind of like a bunch of things that people are just like, ugh. And I think in that way, there is that silver lining of, well, if we can sort through some of this, maybe that situation changes for you as an individual, and maybe things aren't as bad as you think they are, and so on and so forth. So, I don't know. I think we can very easily get down on it, but we can also kind of look at it as an opportunity and actually do something with that as well. But this isn't me telling you to go start a business.
No. Look, I suppose people have to make their own decision, but you basically hit on a good way to frame it. And a good way to frame it is if you're an entrepreneur or wanting to start a new business, you've actually got less competition out there. You've got a bigger market for yourself, and you've essentially got more opportunity. So with you talking about the fewer people doing it, to me that's a positive way to frame it. Suddenly the market's opened up a lot wider for you. So if you've got a desire to do it, paradoxically almost, this might be a good time to consider it.
Yeah. Like you said, the dawn, the night is darkest right before the dawn. So there is opportunity here if you're willing to take it. So maybe this is the push some people need. All right, let's move on. It's time for our Two Ticks Town Talk.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the desert, fair man. I've breathed the mountain air, man. I've traveled, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere.
All right, this week on our Two Ticks Town Talk, we're going essentially down the road from me to Sorrento in Victoria. So it's a seaside town on the Mornington Peninsula in Australia, about 95k southwest of Melbourne. It's just right down on the narrow western tip of the peninsula. Got two peninsulas each side that make up Port Phillip Bay. So it's between Port Phillip Bay and Bass Strait. A popular holiday and resort destination. On the bay side, it's got calm beaches, and then on the ocean side, it's got surf beaches. So you can literally walk from one side to the other and get the different elements of the water. Historic limestone buildings, restaurants, cafes. You get the ferry over to Queensland, to Queen's Cliff. just nick across the Queensland from Sorrento. The ferry over to Queen's Cliff, which is on the other peninsula, Bellarine Peninsula, and scenic walks. And Sorrento's got a population of a bit over 2,000. So the town's European origins go back to late 1860s and 70s. There was an entrepreneur, mention that again, entrepreneur and politician George Coppin, who developed as a holiday destination, and he called it after the Italian resort town of Sorrento, and he invested in infrastructure, including the Continental Hotel, a pier, sea baths, transport links like paddle steamers, and that made it a very fashionable Victorian-era seaside resort. The area that we know as Sorrento is traditionally Boonwurrung country, and the Boonwurrung mob occupied the Mornington Peninsula for tens of thousands of years. And that specific area is known to them as Bullanatulong. In February 1802, when Lieutenant John Murray's crew landed near what's now called Sorrento Beach, they encountered about 18 local Boonwurrung people. Initial interactions involved sharing bread, but unfortunately turned violent. There was musket and ship fire used after there was an ambush on them. And again, DK, it'd be great if this wasn't such a common occurrence in these early interactions, but as we like to say, that's the reality of it. A couple of interesting factoids about Sorrento, including it includes many heritage limestone buildings, as I mentioned. That Continental Hotel, that's an impressive building. They've worked on it and improved it over the years, but they've still kept the character of it. So yeah, I think it's a very attractive building. Athenaeum Theatre, Mechanics Institute, that's where the European Historical Museum is now. There's a heritage walk. There's a thing called down there called the Sorrento Portsea's Artist Trail, and they have plaques that have got copies of works, whatever that process is that you put photos onto, colour photos onto plates. So works by artists like Arthur Streeton and Arthur Boyd, so that you can see where they painted it, and you can see the image that they were looking at, which I think is really interesting, just from an artistic point of view, just to see it through their eyes and think, oh, this is basically where they would have stood and painted this painting. So, yeah, that's worthwhile doing. There's also the Millionaire's Walk along the cliff, where you get a whole lot of great views across Port Phillip Bay. So, yeah, some good walking down there, some good eating. For me, there's the shopping centre has become a little bit commercialised with some too many well-known brands. But last time I went down there, about a year ago, that was starting to change a bit, which was good. But we've got the Sullivan Bay settlement, which is sort of the focus of the 26 Town Talk today, in what is now part of Sorrento. It's about 1k east of the town, which was the first attempted permanent European settlement in Victoria. And that's what caught my eye. Or to be more accurate, it was a comment by a Redditor in the Mornington Peninsula subreddit called Ozdiva who drew my attention to the settlement. So shout out to you, Ozdiva. It was something that I didn't even know about. So very shortly, you'll know all about it. In 1802, Lieutenant John Murray entered Port Phillip Bay and he claimed the area for Britain. Matthew Flinders had explored the region that year. There's a whole lot of positive reports about it, and there was also British fears of French colonisation of Australia. So they were just keen as beans to make sure that something was happening and that land could be claimed for Britain. So in April 1803, HMS Calcutta, which is a 56-gun frigate, and the transport ship Ocean took off from England, carrying Lieutenant Governor David Collins, about 300 male convicts, 16 convicts' wives, some kids, 50 Royal Marines, 18 free settlers and civil officers, so about 400 to 450 people. And they got into Port Phillip in early October 1803. So they anchored there 7th to 10th of October. Collins selected Sullivan Bay, which he named after the British Under Secretary John Sullivan, just near the entrance to the bay. So you can look it up on a map, but essentially you come in through the two peninsulas. There's a huge bay that just looks like another bit of ocean, really, as you're coming through. And just around to the east is where they decided to stop and have a look. They also thought it was a good strategic position, just in case the French came through. They started unloading around the 14th of October, and the settlers and convicts came ashore on the 16th and 17th. On the 16th of October, that was the printing of the first news sheet. In fact, it's the first Victorian printing press, which was set up under the shelter of a spreading tree. They printed out 48 general orders together with garrison orders and published news sheets up until 27th of January. So each order had the royal coat of arms and was placed on the order board. There was just one copy for the whole settlement, but still, that was pretty good. So sort of like overnight, there was just this village born. Chopping down trees, making roads. A parade ground was set up. There was orderly rows of white tents in what had basically been the bush. Only a few weeks before. Did the whole thing. People washing and cooking. Young people going out bird nesting, who had to be severely reprimanded. That's where they just go out and basically steal eggs from birds' nests, which was a thing. At that stage, back in the 1800s, it got to the point where people said, no, this is not a great thing, but people were still tempted because there was this desire to collect these eggs. Of course, there was pilfering, there was fear of fire, and the wells had to be guarded during the day and locked at night to prevent people from actually polluting it, which... bloody funny little monkeys as humans, aren't we?
We are. There's always dickheads.
Yeah, I know. You're sick. Oh, really? You're going to have to drink out of that. The soldiers were sometimes a little bit half pissed, and restrictions had to be placed on their spirit ration. Yeah, no, who would have thought? So they wanted to establish a penal colony to secure the region against French claims and expand control over the Bass Strait trade routes. So the reports describe the surrounding country as beautifully picturesque, gentle elevations, bright verdure and profuse flowers. And they were filled with hope for a viable, self-sustaining outpost with access to the resources. They did have a first church parade on 23rd of October. Everyone turned out to thank God for their safe journey, but the convicts, their clothes were worn to tatters. They were almost due for their half-yearly distribution of new ones. So they ended up for the next Sunday, they were given better clothes and told basically, look, make yourself as presentable as possible. So they got a jacket, a waistcoat, a pair of duck trousers, breeches, 2 check shorts, a pair of shoes and a hat. But the Lieutenant Governor said, well, with the exception of the shoes, that has to last you another 6 months and you had to take care of them. So there's also the first imported livestock. A lot of firsts, as you would have thought, in Victoria. In fact, there's a whole list of firsts. And I thought, well, obvious it's going to be first because it's the first one in Victoria. But so I not listing every single thing, but just the ones of note. So the first livestock imported in Victoria were brought to Sullivan Bay. 2 bulls, 1 cow, 2 heifers, 12 sheep, plus some pigs, goats and poultry. And there was, they were very valuable, and they were actually called in for a census in 27th of October. And so there was an order went up on the board, no part of the livestock belonging to individuals, sheep, swine, goats or poultry, be slaughtered or exported from the settlement until further orders without the government's knowledge and approbation. A return of livestock in possession of individuals of every description to be delivered to the commissary immediately. So it did make sense. I mean, you're trying to make sure that this colony survives. In fact, there was someone or some people kicked a goat and killed it, and they offered a reward of £5, which was back then, £5 was a massive amount of money. So it indicated just how valuable the livestock was. I mean, you weren't going to just go out in the bush and grab another goat. They literally didn't exist.
That's such a funny way to put it, right? Is like, no, there's only one. We don't have any more.
That's right. Here's the 2 bulls. What it means? The 2 bulls. That's it.
That's it. That's all we got. Yeah, which kind of, I guess it puts it in perspective, like how early life would have been. Yes, we think of Australia as a land of abundance. In certain ways, it certainly is. But particularly when you're starting a colony and setting things up, you do have to be pretty clever with your resources and all of that.
Yep, and you've also got the time things. It's nice if you sort of got 2 cows. It's nice if you've got a cow and a bull, and they're pumping out calves every couple of weeks. You've got the normal gestation period, and people. I mean, you'd be getting that point. People would be looking at some of them and thinking, "Oh, that would be delicious," but but you have to do the right thing, otherwise you're going to end up starving. So, there was routine community activities, a lot of hardships. Rations were issued, like, beef or pork, biscuit, flour, sugar, and spirits for the military, of course.
Of course.
They set up cooking facilities. Did their attempts at husbandry, small-scale gardening. Of course, there was the punishments, the flogging for the convicts, and sometimes the soldiers. But water was a critical issue. That was one of the things that became a real problem there. They improvised things called barrel filters, where they sunk barrels into the sand and water would seep through, so to filter out a lot of the salt, but it was still very brackish and made a lot of people sick. So there was also 2 worries about potential uprising, given the size of the Marine Guard relative to the convict population. Also, a number of the tools that were sent to them weren't of great qualities. So they did some exploration, including walks to Point Nepean, which is down west of that. But the convicts had restrictions, like there was no crayfishing allowed on the ocean beaches at night from late December. I don't know why, but apparently that was one of the restrictions. Convicts escaped. There's 21 convicts escaped, including a bloke called William Buckley. Now, I was just going to give him a mention, but digging into his details further, I think there might be a Sorrento Part 2 on the horizon. Possibly. I'll have to go a little bit more into that, but I just thought, looked him up, thought, hang on. It's got a bit of an interesting story to spring off from the Sullivan Cove settlement. So from the outset, Lieutenant Governor David Collins wasn't really happy with the prospect of making a permanent settlement there. So even though they'd sent off exploration parties, they'd found poor soil for agriculture, didn't think there was much suitable timber, lack of reliable fresh water. Now, this is all way down on the peninsula, so they hadn't gone further north to where the Yarra River was, where Melbourne currently is. They also looked at it and they said, the treacherous entrance to Port Phillip Bay might hinder shipping and whaling potential. And they were also getting a bit antsy, thinking they didn't have many Marines and they were wondering about attack. So those, combined with the water problem and what was becoming a general pessimism, led Collins to request abandonment shortly after the arrival. So even though he had basically been given the authority to do it, he wanted to contact Governor King up in Port Jackson colony in New South Wales in order to obtain his support. So even back then, the bureaucrats sent responsibility up the line when they could. But he did have a little bit of a dilemma on how to accomplish it and get the message, because the captain of the Ocean, the ship that was going to be set up there, was uncooperative. He wasn't interested in doing it. So finally, one of his, Mr. Collins' cousins, volunteered to captain a 6-oared cutter with 6 convicts and basically row up to Port Jackson, row up to Sydney. Now, Collins had a whole lot of dispatches and that from England and things had been entrusted to him, but he sort of thought, I might not send that on this voyage. I'm not feeling super happy about that. So 6th November, those 7 blokes took off in charge of what was the first Victorian mail, the message being sent up to Governor King. Everybody was sort of watching to see how they'd go to clear the rip at the entrance to Port Phillip Bay. Because it's really small, the tide's coming in and out of Crest. Yes, it's pretty treacherous water. So they got out there and they were about 60 miles short of Port Jackson when they were actually overtaken by the Ocean, the ship. The captain down there had changed his mind. So, okay, I'll take the mail up. So he took them on board and they delivered everything safely to Port Jackson. So that would be a little bit frustrating that they didn't get to finish it.
Yeah.
But also they're thinking, really? You changed it? You knew everything and you decided to, you stubborn old bugger? So... But anyway, I suppose I made a story for them. So I eventually got permission that said, look, you have to, you can abandon if you want. And they'd only been there 7 months. So Collins and some convicts took off on January 1804 for Van Diemen's Land down in Tassie, which became Tassie, and joined an existing settlement at the Risdon Cove on the Derwent River, and then a second group followed in May. And the move relocated the colony to what became Hobart. So about 30 people died during that brief occupation there. So it was one of the preceded the more successful permanent European settlements of Victoria, particularly decades later what became Melbourne. And as I said, there's a whole lot of firsts, the first magistrates court, hospital, postal service, wedding, christening, all those sorts of things. So looking at modern day Sorrento with the luxury of cars, roads, modern civilization and hindsight, I find it a bit hard to imagine this settlement being so short-lived. However, it's also impressive how quickly they set up a village and then how decisively they cut their losses and moved on. I thought that was good management. So look, there's not much physical evidence remaining down in settlement from today, from the settlement at Sullivan Bay. There's a few graves, barrel parts and leg irons, and the Collins Settlement historic site is now protected. So next time you're down in this week's Two Ticks Town Talk town of Sorrento, take a moment to ponder how you would have fared in this once difficult part of a strange new land.
I like that. That's a really good way to frame it, because you're right. It would have been. This country is a very harsh place, as we are infamous for, I guess I should say. And I feel like at that point in time, you very much would have to realize when there's no point in continuing. The odds are stacked against you, because it's the only way you're going to survive, really. If you keep trying to, tough it out, there's a point where you're probably all just going to die, which did happen a lot. So it's like you said, good management to go, hey, I think enough's enough. We're going to have to move on. I do think it's interesting that instead of going like sort of back to Melbourne or staying sort of within Victoria, they decided to go down to Tassie, which is.
So Melbourne hadn't even been the site for Melbourne hadn't been discovered. So that's that was part of what sort of. So this was 1802. Melbourne. I should have had that written down. Melbourne. They didn't come in through Port Phillip and find the mouth of the Yarra River and think, oh, this is a good spot, until something like 1834, 1840 or so. So that's the and thanks for mentioning that, because that obviously wasn't clear. So this mob came in and they were the first ones into this Port Phillip Bay. And they said, well, this is where we'll go, not knowing what was up further to the north. And they left. And it was, a few decades until they went back there and saw, this is not bad.
I'm curious as to why they didn't do much more exploration, because Port Phillip is pretty big. Like Sorrento to Melbourne, huge. It's what's that distance? Almost 60 k's. So that's 35 miles. That's not an insignificant amount of distance. But obviously they had boats, ships, because they went to Tasmania. So I do wonder what stops them from sort of exploring the bay a bit more, or maybe it was a case of sort of, as you alluded to, the military strategic advantage of controlling the mouth to Port Phillip Bay was kind of their main objective, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but I did think that too, and I didn't find anything to say, well, this is why. I think probably too, they, given at that time, it was like really early days in the colony. It was sort of, I'm guessing their orders weren't, you're here to explore. Your orders are to, we know there's a bay there, get there, secure it, start a new colony, or, start a colony, if you can, a penal colony. And him getting there and thinking, well, this is my orders. I'm not going to sort of take off all over the place because I've been told this is where I need to go. So I don't know, maybe it was a lack of imagination on Collins's part. Maybe it was simply the orders were so strict. Or maybe it's just a case of they just had so much on their plate trying to survive for that 7 months it was, we just don't have the resources to go.
And get me out of here.
Yeah, exactly. Like I could imagine you thinking, well, if we send the ship off and the ship gets lost, we can't go elsewhere. So,
that's true. Yeah, that is true. Or if they hit a rock or a reef or whatever, they wouldn't have known what sort of obstacles lay ahead. And you're right. Actually, that's a good point. They probably didn't have the resources to start a second settlement, which was probably a big determining factor of, we probably can't start another one, so we're just going to have to pack it up and join an existing colony. But I'd imagine this sort of thing has probably happened more than we realize around not just the country, but of course around the world. But yeah, some of these hidden little failed colonies might be an interesting little rabbit hole to go down to find out more about. A wormhole. Well, it might not be
time.
Yeah, I think that could be quite interesting, actually. But again, how much information we have, I don't know. But yeah, no, I think it's a great way to think about it. That's really interesting. You might have to go down and stay in Sorrento. Oh, poor you. You'll have to go and stay there over a weekend or something like that and have a look around, see what you can find.
Now that I know about this, because there is a little monument that said something, because someone had posted something on Reddit saying, I found this monument about Sullivan's Bay. I thought, okay, didn't really, because it wasn't a great photo. I thought I'll put it on this the Mornington Peninsula subreddit, and then it wasn't until this person came back and said, I found an article about that. I thought, well, didn't even know that, because there's not a big deal made about it. But when I'm down there next, I plan to do a little bit more digging around there and understand that a bit more, because now I've got some context.
I think that this is a perfect illustration of that saying that more history has been lost than has been written down. And I think this is like a good example of that, where it's not quite lost, but it's kind of been forgotten to the point where very few people pretty much know about it or talk about it. It's just a handful of people have recorded it. Otherwise, it would effectively be pretty much lost. So, no, so interesting. So interesting. All right, let's move on. Independents possibly look to form new parties to match the rise of One Nation. Former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull says that Teals and independent candidates have an opportunity to fill a vacuum left by the Liberals, but denies that he is setting up an alternative party. That's sneaky bloke. Independent MPs Zelly Stigall, Allegra Spender and David Pocock have confirmed that they are in conversations about a potential. They have the inklings of a plan of independence in response to the rising popularity of One Nation and the far right. While Mr. Turnbull denies his involvement in actually setting something up, he said that there had been discussions with Teal Party MPs publicly going back some years about an alternative. He said, quote, "The Teals are the most obvious people to do it or be part of that. People feel the Liberal Party has moved away from the centre, which is why the Teals were elected. The more the Liberal Party tries to chase and emulate and copy One Nation, the more it builds up the vote for One Nation." End quote. Mr. Turnbull said that he is not aware of a push to poach moderate Liberals, as reported in 9 newspapers, but he did say, quote, "Wouldn't be surprised. People talk about this stuff all the time," end quote. Which I agree. Look, there's always sort of murmurs and things like that about this happening. And I feel like it has been going on since the Teals, sort of the rise of the Teals. Yep. Independent member for Warragar, Zelly Stigall, said she was open to the idea of an alternative political party. She confirmed that she'd been in discussions with ACT independent David Pocock, who told insiders on Sunday that plenty of conversations were taking place. Senator Pocock said the growing influence of One Nation and the far right have helped drive those discussions. Independents have also been angered by changes to campaign spending rules, which cap donations to individual MPs. A Redbridge poll published this last weekend suggested that One Nation could win as many as 59 seats in the lower house if an election were held today, becoming the primary opposition party, which is pretty significant. The poll of more than 6,000 voters showed Pauline Hanson's party could wipe out Nationals and heavily depleted Liberals, as well as flip many Labour-held electorates. Now, of course, we do have to take this with a reasonably large amount of salt. 6,000 people's opinions isn't a huge amount, of course, and it doesn't really truly reflect the electorate, but that's not an insignificant amount of people that they did ask. So there clearly is a trend in one.
That's not a
nation's.
bad amount of
No.
people to ask to get. Because we sometimes hear that and we think, well, hang on, there's 26 million people in Australia. How can they do that? There's a lot that you can accurately extrapolate between, within certain bands to get a reasonable idea. So whilst the number doesn't sound high, as you know, it can tell you a lot about a generalisation of a population base.
Yeah, and I do think 6,000 voters is actually fairly high for a poll like this. They
Exactly.
generally, we call a reasonably high quality poll maybe like 1,000 people, but 6,000 is quite significant.
Yep.
I couldn't find the raw data for that, so I can't give you much more detail than that. But I think there definitely is a trend towards One Nation. We've spoken about it before. But again, until people actually get to the ballot boxes, any sort of polls or those sorts of things, we do have to take them with a grain of salt. Senator Pocock said that the rising popularity of minor party and the right-wing politics was a reflection of the public's dissatisfaction with the major parties. He specifically said, quote, "There is a lot of frustration and anger out there in the community that our political system is not working for Australians. There's this recognition that on so many of these big challenges we're facing, it's not necessarily left versus right, it's actually vested interests and their stranglehold on the major parties versus the Australian people," end quote. And I think a lot of people would agree with him on that. One of the benefits of becoming a formal party, though, would be access to campaign funding, which was reformed under the Labor government and backed by the Liberals following the federal election last year. The changes put in place spending and donation caps on MPs, but a party structure can spend on national campaigning. So the two major parties have made it easier for them to get elected and made it more difficult for independents to be elected. No surprise there. So,
and hang on, just let me check this, GK. And you're saying that both the major parties are in favour of that?
yeah, surprising,
Wow.
I know. Yeah.
Oh, huh.
Funny that, hey? As I always like to say, watch the space, and don't be surprised if we do see a few more parties being formed soon. Ardeet, I know you're a bit of a fan of Pocock, and I think I am as well. He does seem to be he says what he thinks, and I sort of like the way he says it. But would you like to see the formation of a new party, or perhaps several new parties? Is that kind of the trend that you think is going to happen in the future?
Look, on Pocock, I've been bitterly disappointed with politicians for decades now. However, as I said, I've always got that optimistic bend, and I do like how Pocock carries himself and what he says. I got to say, I don't agree with him on everything, but I think he seems to have seems to have a bit of decency and untainted completely by the system about him. I suppose there's two questions really in the way that you're wanting me to respond on that, and one is, would I like to see Pocock and some of the current independents involved in a party, and would I like to see more parties? Independence being singular is both it's a power and a weakness. They're not beholden to anybody, and unfortunately, I'm yet to see a party where people are completely free to have their own opinions. I'd say the Greens are, much as I have issues with the Greens are pretty good on most things for their members being able to disagree with the party line. but there's still a narrative runs through there that you're not going to get your support if you veer too far from that. So that would be the thing that would bother me. Using Pocock as an example, I would be concerned that his impact, which I think is significant now, he's got a little bit of power broker in him, in that he's a vote that has to be courted given the balance of power in Parliament at the moment. And I'm wondering whether going into a party might blunt that. So I'm only 50-50 on someone like him and the independent and the couple of the other independents forming a party. It would depend on what their what would you say, constitution for that party was. If it was a case of we're independents, we're going. I'll give you an example. If it was a case of what we see with, say, the Independent Grocers, IGA, Independent Grocers Association, where you essentially got a lot of independently owned supermarkets, but they band together to buy things in bulk, and they get to make their own decisions about what's in. Yeah, there's some commonality because there's some branding in there, but they appeal to what is wanted locally, which I've seen because there's a few IGAs I've shopped at, and you'll notice that there's a catering to local tastes. If it was something like that, where essentially you could say what you wanted and you were there to get the benefits of being a group, I might have a different opinion. So I'll sort of hold my opinion in reserve for that. In terms of more parties for Australia, we've already sort of got a few. In principle, I don't object to people forming their own party, forming another party. You've got to get in there. You've got to do the work, obviously. And as you stated, the two majors have certainly made it harder for people to do that. But essentially, I support the concept. You can get into problems when things get a bit too fragmented with decision makings and too many specialised interests, but in principle I would have to support it. I would also underscore that the next election is a long way off.
Yes.
When you're talking a couple of years in politics, that's a long time for a lot to change. So it's going to be something we're going to be discussing over the next couple of years. So I would not be placing any heavy bets on what we're seeing at the moment. But what it does tell us at the moment, particularly when you get a poll as powerful as that with the 6,000 people, it's telling us about the sort of dissatisfaction we're seeing in people. And it ties into our first topic as well, on people having those concerns, staying put, how they perceive what's going on with the community and the economy. And look, put personal feelings about parties to one side, and look what it's telling us about the zeitgeist. That's funny. It's not a word we use much. I had it down in my notes, and when you said it earlier on, I thought, that's funny. We've both got that word in our head. I wonder if there's something that's creeped in there subconsciously.
The zeitgeist, perhaps. I love the word zeitgeist. I use it a lot.
Yeah, it is a good word. So what I'm seeing with what's happening with One Nation is it's a reflex. It's an expression. There's a lot of people who look at One Nation's policies and say, that's what I want, that's what I reckon, yep, that's the way they go. And I think there's a number of people who look at One Nation and say, I'm so disgusted with all the other ones. This mob at least seems to be pushing back, and there's a couple of things in there, and it can be a good middle finger. It can be a sign of frustration. It can be something that people view as new and fresh, which there's a lot of counter arguments against that, but I can understand people drifting that way. I also find it interesting how much hatred and derogatory comments are directed towards One Nation. Now, there's obviously a number of their policies and comments that I can understand why people would make those comments. Say with immigration is probably the classic one there. so I can understand people disliking it from that point, but it goes beyond that. There seems to be this expression of divisiveness, which is being either manufactured or naturally occurring or evolving in much of the Western world. There's probably a whole lot of whole other show, or maybe a different show on what that could be, but this divisiveness has just become such a feature of the modern political environment of the last 15 years in particular. We're seeing it manifest here, and I'm not sure just how organic it actually is, and it does concern me just how intense it is. So look, for me, the elections are a long way off. This does tell me something. It's definitely a flag. I'm in two minds about the independents forming a party until I see what's being proposed. What about you? What do you feel about Pocock in particular, and what do you feel about the independents in general forming a party, and what do you think about extra parties in the balance of power for Australia?
So let's start with a little bit of history, I guess. And this is the share of major party primary voting in Australia. This sort of peaked in the sort of mid-1950s, which is two-party dominance that we had in Australia, which sort of makes sense going back. And the amount of votes that these two major parties, that was about 97% of the primary vote, which is significant. Like, that is absolute domination, right? If we fast forward, that was still pretty high up until the 70s, and then by the 90s, it really starts to decline. Today, do you want to guess where it's sitting at today?
Good question. I would not have even come close to 97. Yeah. Where's it sitting today? It can't be. Well, it's got to be a big decline. Of the primary vote.
Yeah. First, number one, are you putting it as a major party or not?
Yeah, for either the Labor or we're talking Labor and Liberal. The coalition though. 62%.
You're not far off. It's 66% at the last federal election in 2025.
That's a big decline.
That's a big decline, and it really has accelerated pretty much since the mid-90s. It's been on its way down, and it's just trending down. So I think that shows you over the last few decades that people aren't happy with the major parties. They do want reforms. They do want bold policies that just aren't really happening. And I think part of the problem with major parties is that they do have a track record that can work against them. So there's quite a lot of baggage. People like One Nation is a minor party, has never really had major traction. Yes, they get occasional senators and things like that, but broadly speaking, they've never really held the keys of power. So they don't have the same sort of baggage, political baggage that the major parties have had. And I think that kind of works in their benefit, at least temporarily. So I do think we'll probably see a bit of a shake-up in the next federal election, which is a few years away. But I wonder if it will be maintained, over several election cycles. And I think that's sort of the big question. Because it's one thing to vote for a minor party sort of in protest, but then it's another thing to continue to vote for that party over the years, especially when those policies start coming in. I quite like Pocock. I think he's quite effective in communicating his points in a way that is very digestible. I don't want to call him a populist because I don't think that's quite fair, but he does. He certainly has, got his finger on the pulse of things right now. To use that word again, the zeitgeist of the Australian electorate. He is quite popular with a lot of people because he's standing up and saying, no, this isn't right and we need to make changes and this is how I think we can fix it. And I think his policies or his sort of policy suggestions are reasonably grounded. And I think that's what the vast majority of people want at the end of the day, is they want politicians that get their job done, that make their lives easier, or certainly don't make their lives harder, and can clearly communicate those ideas to the voting electorate. Because at the end of the day, they're supposed to work for us, right? So, and that doesn't feel like what's been going on over the last few years. It certainly doesn't feel like it when there's been a big push recently about the gas tax, and Pocock's been one of the very vocal voices for that as well, when the major parties just kind of ignore it and pretend
that was an
not happening.
interesting one to bring out, to bring up. And look, that happens to be one of the things I don't particularly agree with on Pocock. But there was so much. It seemed, I should qualify that, it seemed like there was so much popular support for that as an idea for both the majors to give it a meh, nah, was really interesting.
Yeah. And I think you've got to be careful, of course, in politics of kind of getting sucked into populist positions, if you want to call it that. Because especially when you are in government or in opposition, because you do have to sort of play the game in a different way, and that works against them as well, the major parties. But quite frankly, so be it. That's the nature of the game, and I would very much like to see a new minor party, a serious party, basically a bit of a right-wing alternative to the Greens. I've spoken about it before. I think the Liberal Party has strayed too far from the centre and are chasing some of these more populist right-wing sort of, I don't want to use, for lack of a better term, sort of like Trump-style politics. And I don't, we saw in the last election with Peter Dutton really focusing on like the culture war type stuff. And I don't think a lot of Australian voters really care about that sort of stuff. We're not too interested in that. And so,
plus, he was a miserably uninteresting person to try and pull that off too.
The least charismatic leader, just, is that really the best you've got? So you put it all together, right? And you just go, okay, we need something new. And I think a lot of voters, myself included, are very much looking for that. We're looking for something new, something, I don't want to say exciting, because I think that's probably the wrong way to look at it. I don't think most people get excited about politics in the same way as maybe someone like you and I do. But I do think there's a lot of people that go, look, give me an alternative on the right that I can get behind, and it wouldn't surprise me. I feel like I've said it so many times that the Teals need to form a party. I don't know what you call it. But I think the problem for them comes down to, what is our policy direction? We're sort of ideologically aligned, broadly speaking, but I'm not sure that they really can agree on some of these big policy choices. And I think that's going to be the hard thing, is if they're going to come together as a party, they do have to align themselves long term. And that's kind of the crux of the issue, especially for independents, because independents, they don't have to talk to anyone. They can kind of just say what they think. And I think that's really, really powerful, and it really works to their benefit. But the downside of that is that they now, particularly with the financing laws, they are a single person. They are out on their own, and they are going to have to work long term. Come the next election, I think they're really going to have to work really hard to stay as an independent, or be gobbled up by whether that be One Nation or Greens or basically one of the other parties, because they've just got the resources to throw at it in the same way that the independents don't. And so I do think it wouldn't surprise me before the next election if we do see some of these independents basically form a party and go, this is what we got, this is what we're offering. Vote for us if you want sort of like that older style Liberal Party, neoliberalism type party that just doesn't exist really anymore. And like, that is kind of me. I'm sort of one of those voters, and so I do feel like the winds of change have blown in such a way that I don't really think I'm particularly well represented right now. Labor is probably the most centrist party in the country, which feels absurd to say right now, because some of their policies certainly are central, but a lot of them aren't. And so I do think there's a lot of people in the center that just want common sense policies, nothing crazy, that just aren't really represented particularly well. And so I think there is an opportunity for the independents to come together, form a party, and run, particularly in those inner city seats. Inner city, like North Sydney, affluent areas that you would think would skew Greens, but they're not really left-wing people. We need like a right-wing alternative, and I think that's where the Teals have kind of shined. If they can get themselves together, I think that could be a real force to be reckoned with and push back against.
Stegel in Warringah knocking out Abbott was probably the poster child for what you're talking about.
Exactly. And I think, and actually, I'm quite a big fan of Malcolm Turnbull, and I think it's not surprising that he's sort of popped up in these discussions, because I very much feel like, even though he was a Liberal Party Prime Minister, he's very much a centrist. And so it was kind of surprising to me that he got into the position he did get into within the party. It didn't surprise me when he was kicked out. I was quite disappointed. But, you know, the tides had turned for the Liberal Party to have a moderate as a Prime Minister, which is sad to say. So I would quite like him to step back into the political ring if we were to form a new party, sort of to replace what the old Liberal Party was. And actually, I think our democracy is healthier for it. I think having smaller parties is better than having two very large parties that just dominate everything. Having two options is a hell of a lot worse than having, say, 6 or 7. So I'm optimistic moving forward that something might happen here. But as I love to say, we'll have to watch this space and see what happens. But I want to hear from our listeners. If you are sort of one of these disenfranchised voters, would you vote for a Teal type party? Is this something that you're excited for? Let us know on australiatalks@proton.me. I'd love to know what your thoughts are, to just get a feeling for basically, what do you guys think? Let us know. And maybe we'll do a follow-up to this if they actually do something in this space, and maybe we'll give you some of our listener feedback as well. All right, let's move on. It's time for This Week in Australian History.
This week we're covering Australian history, 22nd to 28th of May. May 22nd in 1856, the first Parliament of New South Wales was opened by the Governor, Sir William Denison. 1901, the foundation stone for St John's Cathedral in Brisbane was laid by the Duke of Cornwall and York, and the church celebrated 100 years of construction in 2006 and is the only Gothic-style stone building under construction anywhere in the world. I have a feeling that it might be finished or very close to being finished.
I think it is. I just want to add to this. The Duke of Cornwall and York, as he was called at the time, was King George V, basically. So before he became King George. So
well done. Huh.
But I think I've just looked it up. It finished in 2009, 108 years after laying the foundation stone. So, you know.
Yeah, I thought, okay. I thought that was the case.
Just a couple of years.
I have to put in a suggestion. I think time to renovate. May 23rd, 1889, Louisa Lawson founded the Dawn Club, and that became the hub of the women's suffrage movement in Sydney. 1912, Walter Burley Griffin's design for Canberra was selected as the winner. He'd been chosen to design Australia's national capital, and construction of Canberra began soon after. 1994, police arrest Belanglo State Forest serial killer Ivan Milat at his New South Wales home, and he understandably got sentenced to life imprisonment for murdering the 7 backpackers. May 24th in 1805, William Bligh is appointed the 4th Governor of New South Wales. He arrives at Port Jackson to replace Governor King, who we mentioned in the Two Ticks Town Talk on Sorrento, on August 6, 1806. And it ended in the Rum Rebellion of 1808, and he'd previously survived the mutiny on the balcony. So...
On the Bounty.
Mutiny on the balcony. It wasn't a very big mutiny. It was quite contained, but very high up. So, mutiny on the Bounty. Thank you for that. 1870, Port Adelaide Football Club play their first match. 1905, Empire Day is first celebrated in Australia. It later became Australia Day and then Commonwealth Day, and introduced to foster loyalty to the British Empire. 1960, the Parliament of Victoria authorised the TAB, the Totaliser Agency Boards, with the intention to stamp out starting price SP betting, which is off course betting. And
I've never ever figured out what TAB stood for until you just said that. Totaliser Agency Boards. I've never even known what it, I just was like, I don't know. I have no
TAB,
idea.
The tab,
it's just the TAB.
I mean, it's such a memorable name, isn't it? I suppose it's technically correct, but no wonder everyone just calls it tab.
Yeah, it just rolls off the tongue. I'm going to go down to the Totaliser Agency Board.
Agency Board, yeah. 1969, Keith Payne is the last Australian soldier awarded a Victoria Cross for bravery during the Vietnam War. May 25th in 1870, bushranger Captain Thunderbolt shot and killed near Uralla by Constable Alexander Walker during a highway robbery. 1930, Amy Johnson arrives in Darwin, and she completed the first solo flight by a woman from England to Australia. So 19 days. So that was pretty impressive. There's a few women aviators from around there who really got up in the skies.
That pioneering time, that sort of like
Yeah.
late 1920s, early
What do you
1930s. It would have, that would have been rough. Like that would have been,
God.
yeah. That's quite a feat. I mean, today it's so routine, but back then, holy moly, you know, so many people died trying to do stuff like that. It's quite incredible, really.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't. Good luck to her. Wouldn't be trying to recreate it. May 26 in 1971, Qantas was subjected to an extortion hoax by threatening a bomb unless a ransom was paid. They later caught the bloke. Actually, I had the perpetrator was later caught. Doesn't say whether it's a male or female, but of course it was going to be a bloke.
Yeah. Let's be honest.
yeah, exactly. As we keep saying, let's be realistic. I didn't even have the name down there. 1998, the first National Sorry Day protest is held, and highlighted the stolen generations and called for reconciliation, and it's observed annually since then. 2005, it was actually renamed National Day of Healing to reflect a broader focus on healing and reconciliation rather than solely on the apology, which is probably, it's funny, it's probably more accurate. I don't know that it has the same punch though.
No. I agree with you. Considering it was National Sorry Day for less than a decade, I feel like they probably could have dragged that out a little bit more. But anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Well, I suppose it's not up to us, but yeah, I just feel it was one of those name changes. So it lost a mental link for a lot of people.
Yeah, and sometimes it's good having that sort of visceral gut punch, sort of, that knee-jerk reaction. It has the impact that it deserves. But anyway.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean, yeah. May 27th in 1967, Australia holds a referendum approving 2 amendments to the Australian Constitution relating to Indigenous Australians, and that allowed the federal government to make laws for Indigenous Australians and include them in the census. That was a major civil rights victory. 2005, Chappelle Corby was convicted of drug smuggling by an Indonesian court and sentenced to 20 years in jail, later reduced to 15, and then reverted to 20 years, but she's out. She's out now. Did it get reduced again? No, 2025? No, it must have got reduced because it wasn't last year that she got out.
It was, I'm trying to think when she got out. No, it might have been last year.
Maybe. Oh.
Yeah, because she's back now, but it was pretty recent that she came home. I can't remember if she got... I've just looked it up. She did. Yep. She got a 5-year cut to her sentence in 2012.
Right. God, it seems more recent than that.
Yeah. She was released in 2017. So
yeah, that's what I mean.
Jeez, it was almost 10 years ago. Holy
exactly.
crap.
Exactly right.
Wow. Jeez, I would have said it was a couple of years ago, but wow.
Same here. If you'd have said, I've just looked it up and it was actually 2021, so I thought, that sounds about right. 2017. Huh. May 28th, on the home run, 1851, the arrival of 2 convict ships, the Lady Kennaway with 249 male prisoners and Blackfriars with 260 female prisoners, further turns Tasmanian sentiment against transportation. And it eventually led to the end of it there. It just people just had enough down there. 1975, the Family Court of Australia is established. And finally, in 2003, there was a hijack attempt on Qantas Flight 1737 between Melbourne and Launceston that was thwarted by a flight attendant and passengers who overpowered the attacker, who was armed with a knife and explosive device. And I got to imagine that after all that adrenaline was gone and the police interviews were completed, that the flight attendant and passengers involved immensely enjoyed their first beer. What do you reckon, DK?
I reckon they certainly did. Absolutely. All right, so that sound means it is time for the 4X Bottle Top question. And this week, these are just general knowledge questions, but I think they're fairly easy. I wanted to go easy on you. I feel like sometimes I throw some really difficult questions at you. And just some sort of general trivia questions for Australia. So play along at home. Question 1, what is a billabong?
Well, I do know a billabong, having hunted near them and camped near them. So if you don't know it, it's confusing. But this is leading in. If I get it wrong, it's going to be embarrassing, isn't it? It's essentially a pool of water that is often fed to a creek. But when the creek dries out or the bit of river dries out, that pool of water remains.
Exactly. Yep. You hit the nail right on the head. Oftentimes they are what we call oxbow lakes, which is where the river sort of changes direction and you end up with a bit of a boomerang sort of shaped lake right next to a river. And oftentimes when it floods, that area gets flooded and so on and so forth as well. And then sometimes those oxbow lakes rejoin the river as rivers meander over their course. It's not exclusive. They're not all oxbow lakes, but generally speaking, that is how they're formed. But yeah, so we talk about them a lot, but I've realized we haven't really explained exactly what they are. So it's one of those things that's just ubiquitous in the culture here in Australia. So for our international listeners, a billabong is basically a little lake, generally an oxbow lake, but not always. But a permanent body of water, basically. All right, second question. What percentage of Australia's population lives within 50 kilometres of the coast?
Oh, that's got to be shirtloads. 50% kilometres of the coast. So 50 kilometres of the coast.
Yeah.
Just running all the major cities. It's got to be in the 75 to 85. I'm saying 82.
Oh, you're so close. It's 85 to 87%.
Wow.
Depending on how
That's
you
even a bit
measure.
higher. Huh.
Yeah, it sort of depends on how you measure the coastline, and of course, it is somewhat of a guesstimate based on population densities and so on and so forth. We'll know exactly this year because it's the census year, so we'll get new stats. But yeah, it's shockingly high, much higher than I would have thought, actually. I would have probably said maybe like 75%, 65, 70%, something like that. But yeah, we are a continent, but we don't like the interior. To be fair, it is quite inhospitable as well. So well done. Can you get 3 out of 3?
Ooh, been a while.
What percentage of Australia's population are first-generation immigrants? So these are people born overseas, have moved here. What current percentage? Again, this is an estimation because we don't have the full stats, but this is from the Bureau of Statistics.
What percentage of Australians are first-generation immigrants? That's a really good question. Oh, that's a hard one. I don't reckon it's as high as what people would think with the qualifier of first generation. I think it's got to be around about it's got to be somewhere between the 14 to 23. I'm going to say 18%.
Ooh, that's a good guess. I could see where you were sort of going with it, but it's actually a bit higher than that. Do you want to have another guess?
Is it really? It's a bit higher than that. Okay. Gosh, first generation.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's also going to keep... Yeah, I mean, it's not just first generation recently, it's first generation ever. So if you were first generation 60 years ago, you're still first generation.
That's right. Yep.
Okay. That's a change. All right. Well, I'll take advantage of my second guess, and I'll say 28.
Very close. It's 32%.
That's a lot higher than what I thought.
That's surprised me as well. And the vast majority come from the UK, India, and China, followed by New Zealand. So, but the overwhelming majority are Brits, are POMs. So if you know a first-generation Brit, give them a pat on the back, a slap on the bum, and say thanks for being here. One of the 32%. But yeah, I mean, to be fair though, we have always been sort of a nation of immigrants, so it's not surprising that number's quite high, but higher than I would have thought.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So on that, thank you so much for joining us for another Australia Talks. If you have any feedback or suggestions for topics, please get in touch with our email at australiatalks@proton.me. We'd also be grateful if you could subscribe and give us an honest review, as this helps us out immensely. But the best thing you can do for the podcast is share it with a friend that you think might like it. Otherwise, join us next week for another episode of Australia Talks. And as always, thanks for listening. And don't forget to tell your mama I love her.
Thank you, DK.